Okay, so here's a photo of the medallion with a bust of Christ. This is a Frankish artwork from the 18th century that I've chose to recreate. Now, this piece of jewelry is made using the cloisonne enameling technique, which I have learned in past metalsmithing classes because I am a metalsmithing major and I use that technique quite a bit in my own work, so I'm familiar with it. And this technique was used so that they could make something and replicate something that looked like gems, because the glass kind of still had that shiny, glittery, gem-like quality without being as expensive as a gem. When researching this piece of jewelry, I found that the two letters, other people may have already known this, but I didn't, are the alpha and omega signs, the beginning and end of the Greek alphabet, representing the beginning and end. And Christ is holding a Bible, and it is above a green ark that represents the Ark of the Heavens. And you can tell in this medallion that it is Christ because of the cross and halo around his head. So, my first step in recreating this was looking up how big it actually was, and it is about 2 inches. So I started with a 2-inch copper disc that I cut out. Here is my copper disc with my copper cloisonne wire that I had laid out in the shape of the bust of Christ. Now, cloisonne wire is just flat wire, so I had flattened my own copper wire and cut it and shaped it to be as close to the original as I could. And then I laid it on top of this copper disc that I had put on hard fusing clear and already enameled that. So now I'm putting on another layer of hard fusing clear so that my copper wire fuses to that first layer of enamel and sticks to it so that there's no gaps in between the original disc of copper and the newly added wire. Now, another reason to sprinkle more hard fusing clear on top of my wires is that so when it's in the kiln, I can see when the enamel has melted because it won't look like white dust on top of my piece anymore. This is an important step for people who work with silver cloisonne wire because it can only stay in the kiln for like a little bit before the silver melts. But with copper, we won't have this problem. So next you can see me pulling it out of the kiln after a successful firing. And you can see that it's fully fused. There's no gaps. That's cooled down. We begin the step of filling all of it with colored enamel. Now, I'm doing my best to color match this. It's very old, so all the enamels I'm using are much brighter than the original. And what I'm currently doing is dabbing on some wet enamel, which is just powdered enamel mixed with water, so that it can fill all the gaps, which takes a while to do. But in this next slide, you will see that I have filled it all with wet enamel, and I'm letting it dry before it goes in the kiln. Otherwise, the water will boil and throw all my enamel off the copper plate. And you can see now that it is all dry, it is no longer dark, and it's about to go into the kiln for its first firing. And after the first firing, it's really going to shrink down, and I'm going to have to do this process of layering multiple times probably 5 times, but I won't show all. Now here's the medallion coming out of the first firing of the colored enamel, and you can see that the enamel is not the same color as it was when it was dry, and that's because glass goes through a color change once it comes out of the kiln, so as it cools down, it's going to change back into some more regular colors. After repeating this step of filling it with enamel and then refiring it 5 times, this was the result. And as you can see, the surface is very bumpy and uneven. So the last step, well, one of the last steps, is to stone it. And to do that, you're going to take this file that I have in my hand, and you're going to get the glass wet, and you're going to basically file it down. And what this is really going to do is make it even, and it's going to make the copper wire really shine through, like this is what it looks like after a long time of stoning. It is decently flat, all the copper wire pops, but you can see that the raised areas of the glass are now extremely matte. And I'm going to have to do one final refiring to get all that to shine up again. So here's the final product of the replication of the medallion with a bust of Christ. It took about 7 hours in total to make. It took 5 hours to do all the enameling because it just takes so long to refill everything with colored enamel, let it dry, put it in the kiln, let it cool down, because if it doesn't, then the wet enamel is going to crack the hot enamel underneath. And then just that process of refiring, and every time I fired the front with more enamel, I had to also enamel the back, because if you don't, the whole medallion wants to potato chip, basically, and curve up on the edges. The copper setting took me around an hour and a half to make. I don't remember exactly. But I'm overall pretty happy with the result. It doesn't look exactly like the original, but I got pretty close, and it is kind of hard to shape all those wires to look the same proportions as the original within fitting in a 2-inch diametered circle. The colors on my version are obviously more brighter. They're not as cracked as the original, so it makes it look pretty different when you see it with more bright colors. But I tried to color match it the best I could with the enamels we had, and I overall think it was a pretty good experience. I had never worked with. So thanks for watching my video on the cloisonne enameling technique and recreating this medallion. I hope you learned something interesting and saw how much work goes into creating a small object like this.